interesting podcast today because
if we don't get shut down.
Because we're talking about tyranny. And I'll be honest with you, I never thought we would be having this conversation in America to the extent that we're having it now. In other words, there's always the fear of tyranny in a free democracy, right, in a republic, except that we see it falling apart in front of our eyes slowly but surely. How do these things happen? We say it all the time. First they happen slowly, then all of a sudden, right? Then all of a sudden it's too late. Yeah. And so you've got a pretty good show laid out. I got to give you some credit here. You got a pretty good show laid out.
Well, you started this, okay? And
is this a conspiracy theory show?
It is a conspiracy.
No, it's some people's one man's conspiracy theories, another man's spoiler alert.
And
do they not turn out to be true?
And I keep trying to say no. And then as I start to put the dots together, I'm going, oh my gosh, how did we not see this?
How do we allow for this in America? That's what drives me crazy.
That's the statement. How do we allow this?
How could so many people, even if it's only a third, how could a third of 335 million people be so comfortable with this?
I don't even understand how anybody could be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Not even a third, So, okay. So here's what we're talking about. For people who don't know what FISA is, it's a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act that was done in 1978. People don't realize. They think it just happened at 9/11. Right. In 9/11, after the terrorist attack, it was kind of upgraded, and it was called the U.S. Patriot Act, and it gave it enhanced tools. And what it does is it goes out and looks at any foreign intelligence by means of electronic. Now, these are foreign intelligence that could be a threat to the United States. That's what they're looking for.
And but in '78, it was telephones. That's all it was. So they were bugging telephones of possible foreign terrorists.
Yeah, electronic surveillance, physical searches, pin registry, traps, and trace. Okay, so let me just kind of give you a little bit of what that means, just for the simple layman of what that means. If I know that Kevin Haggerty is a known terrorist, which right now they may say you are, and they know Kevin's telephone number, they would put a trap on your telephone number, and anybody that contacted you, they would look at that number, and then they would go out and find out who that person is.
And see if they're also a terrorist.
Yeah, it's just an investigative tool. Who are they talking to? And, of course, what they're looking for is, we know you're a terrorist. We know that you've done things. So if we start to see telephone numbers in the United States, we may have a terrorist cell here.
Right,
it's an investigative tool.
I think an important tool, too, given the way the world is.
It is an important tool.
Here's the thing. It's a very different for Americans, and I don't think for foreign nationals, but for Americans, there is protection for what you say to some extent, right? So it is. It's more about what you've done that would warrant a warrant like that, rather than what you've said. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that's very vague, and that's the importance of a sound judicial branch of government, right?
With great power comes great responsibility. And I remember when the Patriot Act happened, how many people complained about it because they were afraid that they would start listening to American citizens. Yep. And they kept saying over and over and over again, the only reason that we would look at an American citizen is if they're getting messages from a terrorist that we know, which makes sense. I mean, all of a sudden we have.
And I was one of the people back then that didn't particularly care if they listened to my.
Yeah, we did.
So how irresponsible was I? That was just 15 years ago, right?
Yeah. So
how irresponsible 20 years ago were we to be so nonchalant about it? And look what's happened.
Because we had been attacked.
Yeah. It was after 9/11.
I mean, they almost 3,000 people died. Probably over 3 now because of what's happened.
Yeah.
But we watched these towers just collapse. We watched in horror as we saw these things, people falling out. I mean, we wanted to know who was calling whom in our country. We wanted to know. We were looking forward to that. But let's fast forward. And what we're seeing right now, if you're following the news, because if you're watching news like CNN or MSNBC or anything like that, you may not know about this. You truly may not know about this, that the Durham report is now showing that Hillary Clinton and her group, and plus the White House, used FISA to go after, first off, it was like the candidate President Trump, then it was the President Trump, to say that he was a Russian mole. And I mean, you can go out and read this, folks. This isn't made up stuff anymore. This is out there. He has put out information that a person that had been given power to be listening, I mean, to be helping the government combat cyber threats, uses, he used his privileges, his privilege access to the internet to spy on Donald Trump before he was president and Donald Trump after he was president, to try to find something that would say that he was Putin's puppet. And they took it to the FBI and the CIA and got them to spy on Trump to try to prove that he was a Russian spy. And it went on for 4 years, the whole 4 years that
and they had to keep renewing that FISA warrant.
They had to,
And they
until finally they said, okay, we've been duped. And that's one of the things that they're wanting to say here. They're wanting to say, oh, well, listen, the FBI and the CIA, they were duped by these people. No, you do your own homework.
No, and
you don't do, it's like if I have an informant comes in, I mean, classic case, a very high profile couple that was living in Bel Air. The husband comes in and says, my ex-wife is giving drugs to kids and all these things like this. And we said, how are we getting in there? How do we get into the house? Well, I'm going to let you take one of my friend's daughter into a party. It's like, this is too far-fetched. Well, come to find out, they had went to every agency in that area to try to get them to go in and bust. He was just trying to do something to his wife, but it was like we had to do our own research.
Yeah.
We weren't just going to take his word and go do something. We needed more than just.
But but here's the thing. It's the political ideology. It's not the politicians that come and go. It's the people it's the staffers that stay administration after administration after administration.
There's still people
that
in here
have such a strong network. There's people there now that were there with Obama, molested all the way through Trump, and now are part of the for the Biden administration.
Yeah.
So I think part of the problem is not so much the people that we elect, but that they essentially have professional staffers that never leave. Right?
Yeah.
And they have their own little private network of how to get things done.
And so this
and that's the shadow government, by the way.
And trust me, it is alive and well right now. It is alive and well because it was alive and well. And listen, I'm not saying it's only Democrats. Let's make sure that we're perfectly clear.
Oh, I'll be clear.
I'm not saying that it's only. But what I'm saying is over the past 20 years, since 9/11, since Bush has left, and since that point in time, this has grown just unbelievable. I mean, just mind-blowing what they have been doing. So this brings to what we wanted to kind of talk about today. Because we know that this is going on because, okay, let me just throw a couple of more things in real quick before we get to what we're talking about today. We saw in the Obama administration they used the IRS to go after conservative talk. They went after Tea Party. They went after patriots. They went after people, anybody that said something like that in their 501c3 status or wanting it, they went after. We saw that. They were taken to court. They were slapped, and they said, don't do it again. Of course, nobody went to jail. Nobody, it was just like, don't do it again. That was the ruling.
Like I said last week, nobody ever goes to jail. That's the problem.
Yeah.
They won't go to jail this time either.
And so in our church safety stuff, we get these, we can go to it now. We get these government documents that come out, sent to us, and this is the National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin. And it just talks about, it's sent to us as churches because they re-up it like every time there's an event. So when we look at the Colleyville, Texas, the Jewish community, the Jewish synagogue, that was just the guy who went in and took over hostages, they reposted what they had put out now listen to this, to their internal group. This first went to the internal group.
Who's the internal group?
The Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, CIA, FBI, any of these people like that, law enforcement. But now they sent it out to us because we're churches. We're involved in the churches because of Colleyville. It raised its ugly head again. So the United States remains in a heightened threat environment fueled by several factors, including online environment filled with false and misleading narratives and conspiracy theories and other forms of dis, and malinformation, or MDM, introduced and or amplified by foreign, but they put this in, and domestic actors. So when you kind of look at this, you go, okay, all right, But then it goes down and it says, while the conditions underlying the heightened threat landscape have not significantly changed. In other words, they send this out every time that something happens to a church. Has not significantly changed over the last year. The convergence of the following factors have increased.
Unpredictability and complexity.
Yeah, increase the volatility, unpredictably, and complexity of the threat environment. The proliferation of false or misleading narratives which sow discord or undermine trust in the U.S. government institutions. So you and I have been on air now. You and I have been on air for over a year.
Right.
And I could take that sentence right there and say that they feel like that we have done sowed discord and undermined public trust in the U.S. government.
I would say part of my goal is to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, part of my goal is to hold these people accountable.
Sure it is.
So I do not want people to blindly follow this or any government, be it Biden or Trump or Obama for that matter.
I want to go back and see if I can find one of the previous National Terrorism Advisory System bulletins to see if that was worded that way. I want to go back and look for it to see if they said the proliferation of false and misleading narratives which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government. Because that is so new to me. Now, when I say that, I take a step back. Because you and I did a webcast where we talked about, before Biden was even in office, that the Democrats, that organization, had put together a letter that
Democratic
said,
Socialists of America.
Democratic Socialists of America, go back and look at this, had put out a letter that said white Christians were associated with racism and
white nationalism.
White nationalism.
So they well, we see it in real terms all the time, and this is kind of the point of what we're talking about, because we saw it in Loudoun, Virginia, with the school board and the parents. We see it with Joe Rogan, right? Mm-hmm. Who's not a conservative by any measure, but they don't like he says what's on his mind, and they don't like the things he says, so they go after him. Right. I've seen it in my own life with my other podcast and this one. I think we're tuned down or shadow banned because of the things we talk about. Right. So it doesn't take. We need to realize it doesn't take a room full of computer geeks to do this anymore. No. There are mainframe computers that are picking up keywords and phrases constantly, pictures, anything you want, and they can tune down. They don't have to shut you down. They can tune you down. And I learned the hard way. I didn't have a big show, but I went from 500 views a week to 50 overnight.
I told you last week, we talked about this last week, two separate people that I had not seen in a long time at two separate locations. I mean, one out in Pinellas County, the other one here in Pasco County, stopped me and said they've been listening to us on the internet. But yet our numbers don't show that.
Yeah.
Our numbers don't show that we're being listened to. I hear it over and over and over and over again that people are listening to us.
They unsubscribed me from my own channel.
Yeah.
I mean, how crazy is that?
So what is going on out here, folks?
Why we can't be okay with this. I think this is the bottom line here is we as Americans, whether you're on the left or the right, you cannot be okay with not having the conversation. And what's happening is, and we see it in Canada right now, what's happening in Canada, our closest ally are essentially part of the United States, right? Our State Department has said nothing about the Emergency Powers Act that they've confiscated people's money, people that have sent money to the truckers.
GoFundMe.
They've taken their money. They took $10 million from GoFundMe. They've taken a couple million from the Give Send Go, the Christian organization, who said we're not going to participate in this not giving the money to the truckers. This is right over our border.
Well,
right?
But
and we're okay with it.
Let's stay close to home. You have a lieutenant with the Norfolk Police Department who gave money to a GoFundMe page for Rittenhouse, and he was fired. And yet this kid was found not guilty of all charges.
They had video of it being self-defense, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean,
but yet we have taken away innocent until proven guilty. We've taken that completely out of the agenda
for half of us. Well, this brings up another problem. We're only upset. The government and the media is only upset when it's the conservative side that they're worried about.
Sure.
So they're upset because the conservatives are truckers. But we spent a whole summer last year, a whole year, burning down cities all around America. And there
peaceful
was
protests.
Yeah, and that was mostly peaceful.
Peaceful
not
protests.
Not a word of this was spoken, right?
Right.
And then so then you get January 6th or the truckers up in Canada right now, and the truckers are coming to shut down Washington in March.
Right.
They are and now all of a sudden it's a big deal. Well, here's the problem. It is a set of rules for one class and not the set of rules for the other class.
We saw that at the Super Bowl. Come on, let's be realistic. You know, you tell them that if they're coming in, they're handing out masks. They're handing them out and saying, hey, if you're going to be in the stands, you got to be wearing the mask. But when you looked up and saw the celebrities and all the rich people and all those things like that, there wasn't a mask to be found.
No.
All of them were holding their breath.
That thing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, too, was the staff holding the fine china, all wearing a mask, and then all these rich politicians, millionaires, billionaires, not wearing a mask. So it is definitely classism. It is, and so it is not okay, right? And here's the crazy part, and the part that worries me, and the part that, by the way, may be supernatural, may be even demonic, is that so many people are okay with it. Yeah. So in the end times, we will be deceived people will go around deceiving or being deceived.
Yeah.
And I think there's a class of people that are very comfortable deceiving, and there's a class of people that are easily deceived. And so we Christians have to be very careful to zealously exercise our Christian discernment, our human agency, if you're not a Christian, right? That you can take a set of facts and derive a relatively rational conclusion. You may still be wrong, but they're saying you are not qualified to have the information.
You can't even give an opinion.
Right.
You're not qualified to give an opinion.
Right, because you're not in that class. Right. You're not qualified to even ingest this information and to make a reasonable conclusion. Right. Christians need to be very careful not to give up. That's definitely besides being tyrannical in an earthly sense, that's unchristian, right?
And so, you know, real quick, we'll kind of talk about it here, but then we'll talk about it later on. How do we stop this? We stop this by our votes. That we have to live by the way the government is run. That God's, you know, God, Christ, everybody's very clear about following the authorities of what's going on. Now, you and I will talk, and you and I will agree that if it starts to step on our religious freedoms, then we have a problem with it.
It has to be godly. So Romans 13 is kind of what you're referring to.
Yeah.
But I think Hitler, by the way, used Romans 13 to justify what he did, right? Yeah. So it can't be whatever Romans 13 means. It can't mean what we hope it means, right? It can't mean what Hitler thought it meant, right? Or exploited it to mean. Right. So it's got to mean something. But I think it has to be godly. So us as Christians always have to hold everything up to Scripture. Our highest calling, our highest relationship, our highest duty is to our faith and not even to our country. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I consider myself a patriot, but I am by far a Christian, a child of God before I'm even an American.
But we look to make sure that justice is done. This is why we started doing this, to make sure justice was looked at, righteous justice, righteous anger over things that people are being hurt. I mean, to freeze people's money who are hard workers that have families at home and freeze their assets is just mind-boggling. It is tyrannical government at its best. And I mean, that's what Nazi Germany did. They froze the Jewish money completely. Of course, we did the same thing. We froze Japanese money over here. We froze accounts. We froze German accounts and stuff like this in the name of protecting the country. But we didn't do it. To me, there was a lot of stuff that happened that wasn't done the right way. So when you have a government that is running freely and doing whatever they want and nobody is standing up to them, when do we stop it? When do we stop
I think you know my prediction. This doesn't end well, and we'll kind of get to that. I think there is a solution to this, and we'll get to that as the show unfolds here. But we have in America, the press generally held the government in check.
They
right?
used to.
So we all remember Watergate. That was broken. That whole story was broken by the Washington Post, right? The Post would never go against the Democratic Party right now. Never, regardless of the price that they paid. Look at the Durham report that just came out. And nobody but Fox is talking about it.
MSNBC, zero.
That should be troubling to everyone.
Look, whoever takes power next, we have to guarantee that it does not happen against the opposite party. And so if we, the conservatives, take power next time, we got to make sure that the Democrats are protected. I am on their side if their rights start to be violated. We need to be standing up for all, not just the parties.
And you bring up a great point for conservatives and for Christians. We love to pray for justice for our enemies, but mercy for ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. So we cannot say that this is okay, that the right does it to the left, and then say the left shouldn't be doing it to the right. Americans shouldn't be doing this, period. Christians should not be doing this, period. We are all perfectly capable of having this conversation, and I can eat the watermelon and spit out the seeds. I can tell a crazy person when I see one, and I'll be honest. I became a Republican I got my little voter ID card. I'm a Republican for the first time in my life, and I don't see myself ever voting for. I think the left has gone so far left, the Democratic Party is so far off the reservation that I couldn't imagine even voting for someone like Tulsi Gabbard now.
Right.
So even a centrist, I'm not sure I can vote for within the Democratic Party. So it is, and I bring that up because I think it's important in Florida to vote in the primaries, and I wasn't allowed as an independent. You're not allowed to vote in primaries in Florida, so I picked the political party so I could vote in primaries. But we need to be very careful who we're putting in office, and more so who we're putting in local office. We like to focus on the Hillarys and the Trumps and the Bidens and the Obamas, but who's running your state? Who's running your county? Right? Who's running your local municipality?
And
that's going to become more and more important.
It is more and more. Yes, exactly. Because this is where, look, we just saw it happen in Virginia. Youngkin wins. How did that happen? I mean, his opponent was like, he was just going to walk in.
Oh, yeah.
It was almost like a Hillary Clinton moment where she thought that she was heir to the throne. She wasn't even worried about it. She kept saying, how am I behind? But, it was very easy. You're a part of the establishment, and we got tired of it. But I want to go back to something you said real quick, to go back just a moment. One of the things that concerns me about I have this love-hate type relationship about what is happening right now. I know that when the Republicans take the House and the Senate, I truly believe that's what's going to happen in the midterm elections. I am so afraid we're going to take our eye off the ball of getting things done and start investigations just like the Democrats have done. But on this, why I say love-hate is I want the truth. And right now the truth is not being fed to us.
And even if the truth is the government, the left is never going to really hold the right accountable or the right hold the left accountable because they're in it together. They're different tentacles of the same beast. It's our federal government that's the problem.
It is. But if
there's zero accountability, there's way more accountability for the right than the left. But really, at the end of the day, no one's ever going to go after Hillary because the press will never allow for it. The press, hear what I just said? The press wouldn't allow for it, right? Yeah. Public opinion would not allow for it. That is a republic that's already fallen.
Well,
we're not in the condition we think we are.
It's just like the election, saying that, people that say that it was not a legit election get shut down.
It's me.
Yeah, me too. But you can brag about it in Time magazine. I think, did you say this before or after? How does a third of America believe this way? How does anybody look at that election and go, oh, it was legit?
Or I'm comfortable with it. Now, did Biden win fair and square? Maybe, but because enough people hated Trump. But how could you be okay with the changing, the overriding of the state laws? All of our election laws are on the state level. Yeah. And they just overrode it, right. We're just, for now on, we're not going to do it that way, right. Where the legislation of these conservative states would have voted against all these mail-in ballots and harvesting and everything that they did. So So to be okay with that election outcome is not okay.
Yeah, it's
even
not
if
okay.
it's your guy.
And you and I've talked.
I'm not a huge Trump fan.
Yeah, you. Well, I am.
I'm way more of a Trump fan than a Biden fan.
Yeah, we both talked about it. How did Biden win so many votes and the down ticket
all be red?
All be red.
That's awkward too.
Yeah, yeah.
And then also, how did he get more votes than Obama?
Yeah, that's the big one right there to me.
He got like 5 million more votes than Obama got.
Yeah, and Obama was a popular.
I almost voted for him. I really did. If it wasn't for Reverend Wright and the saying, really being clear what fundamentally transforming America meant, that made me uncomfortable.
This is I talked to one of the kids at the church. He's like 20 years old, 22 years old. And we were talking about the Super Bowl, okay? If you watch the Super Bowl, it was the Rams and the Bengals, okay? After the halftime, the Bengals throw this bomb to a receiver, and the receiver grabs the face mask of the defender and, like, turns his head completely. And, I mean, it's just like everybody in the world saw it, but it wasn't called. It was not called. And so the receiver catches the ball, scores a touchdown. Now, the defender, after his face mask was his head was almost taken off, he kind of like just stopped the play because he thought somebody saw that. I mean, it was that obvious. And then it didn't get called. So we were talking about it, and I said, I have this theory, and this is what I am afraid of if the Republicans take over. I want them to get things done. I want the border. I want fuel. I want the economy. I want all these things like this. But toward the end of the Super Bowl, there was a pass interference called against the Bengals that when they went back and looked at it, supposedly he grabbed the Rams receiver's jersey, and held it. When you went back and looked at it, it was like, where do you get this? It's like if we're going to let them play, let them play. Where do you see a pass interference? And in my mind, the guy that missed the pass interference call on the other play had to make up for it. So he calls a pass interference against the other, the team, so that he can justify, well, I didn't give you this one, but I'm going to give you this
still
one.
Doesn't make it okay.
It doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it better. But that's the mindset that you kind of have of, well, I missed this one, but I'm going to make up one for you. You know, really? And so that's what I'm afraid of. We're going to get rid of one government, one style, and we're just going to put in another one that's going to be doing the same thing.
And the reality is like I said, the problem is with the federal government. So it is, I think we need to get the power as close to the people as we possibly can. We have the opportunity to have 50 little separate experiments maybe, right? And if socialism works, then that state will thrive. If capitalism works, then that state will thrive, and so on. There's a balance that could be eventually found in there that then everybody would, to be successful, adopt, right? So I think we're in a great position as a country to kind of solve these problems for ourselves. The other thing we wanted to talk about was, this is interesting here.
Yeah, well, this goes along with what we're talking about. Free speech is about to go out the window.
All right, and so I'd say it's already out the window, but go ahead. Explain what's going on here.
I mean, Joe Biden has nominated a lady, that is so far left that she is like one of these that, if you're not talking about what they're talking about, it goes back to the national threat. If you're trying to sow discord under the federal government, they want to shut you down. They don't want you. The teachers union tried to shut us down. All these different, the public interest doctrine. I don't know if you remember that. I remember when that happened. You couldn't be on a conservative talk radio show without having a liberal point of view. You had to have both points of view. You couldn't just come in and say, hey, I don't agree with what the president says.
Hannity and Combs, remember?
Yeah, Hannity and Combs. I mean, that was a perfect example of what the public interest doctrine was all about. But Reagan stepped in and said, nah, we're going to get rid of this, had the fairness doctrine disbanded because of the problems, basically browbeat radio and television networks not only to have any opinion for the sake of running, but it was just hiring more attorneys and all these things like this for staff and broadcast. If you said one thing, somebody else had to say something else.
Right.
She's kind of like interested in that. She'd like to see that happen. She'd like to see it to where, like, Fox News would have to bring back a Hannity and Combs. Of course, they couldn't bring back Combs. He passed away. But you would have this liberal point of view that had to be always said to quieten down the right side. So,
Well, I wish this article would have had some quotes by her, but she runs an advocacy group, or co-founded an advocacy group that's financed by George Soros.
that was another issue.
And but she believes that, and just like Biden, that and Justin Trudeau, obviously up in Canada, that eradicating dangerous misinformation or political dissension is the problem, right? Social, religious issues that ferment the population. So they're saying that anybody that disagrees with them should not have the right to speak anymore. Mm-hmm. And you got to be careful what you ask for, just mm-hmm. because what about when the other side's in power? Mm-hmm. Are they going to now shut you down? Well, I say they can't, because they don't control the education system. They don't control the media. There's a lot. The medical industry is controlled by the left. I mean, we're not in good shape, bro.
No.
I think we need to take a serious look at the Convention of States from Article 5 of the Constitution. So we can talk about that a little bit. But I think that is partially the solution. And let's explain to folks what that is.
Sure.
So here's a breakdown of the U.S. Constitution I have in front of me. In Article 5 of the Constitution talks about the making amendments to the Constitution, and that can be done by 2/3 of Congress, right? Or it says that an application of legislature of 2/3 of several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intent and purposes as part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislature of 3/4 or several states, or by the convention in 3/4. So, essentially, if they can get 2/3 of the states, 34 states, to call a conference of states, then those states can vote to amend the Constitution. And if 3/4 of those states agree to amend the Constitution, it's a constitutional amendment. They don't need President, Congress, and Senate to do it.
Right.
Now, here's what they can do. These are the states that can now impose federal term limits. We can stop having career politicians. We can require the government to balance the budget every
right.
year.
Right.
There's unlimited number of amendments that they can make to limit the power of the federal government, therefore bringing the power of the government back to the states, where I think it's going to become more and more important that the states that will begin to have to protect us from the federal government.
Sure.
And that's kind of where we're going with this. So I've been kind of somewhat involved with the Convention of States for a while, and I think they're halfway to having all the states they need. And then they can amend the Constitution. Now, of course, that's not without risk, right? So let's hope they don't do anything stupid.
Right.
Because they are amending the most important document we have. But this has to happen so that then it protects the filibuster, so they can no longer pack the Supreme Court. There's a whole lot of things that the federal government's trying to do to consolidate power now while they can. That something like this would interrupt and essentially eliminate. So I think it's super important.
It's just getting all those states together. That's going to be the hard part.
And what states would be willing to do it? Yeah. Now, most of the states in America are conservative, or the states are conservative. So while California and New York have the largest populations and they're very liberal, Illinois like that, Wisconsin. If you go state by state, most states are led by Republicans, or are Republican-led states. So, conservatives would have the majority in this scenario.
So how do we get them to what's the next step? What can we do here?
The state leaders, the governors the people vote on. I think I signed a petition. I think Florida is one of the states, but once they have the consensus in the state, then they can sign up for this. And once 2/3 of the states, I think 34 states, have signed up for it, then there's nothing that the federal government can do to stop it from moving forward. Yeah. So I think it's risky, but I think right now we need to We need to protect the rights of the people, and we need to return the power of government back to the people. The federal government, in the 20th century, the federal government just got too powerful. It's not the way that it was designed.
And this just goes back to what we're talking about. Until something like this happens, they're going to continue to do what they're doing right now.
This may be the only thing that averts all-out civil war.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, we talked about that so many times, and I'm hoping that the states are the ones that do the civil war, not us. You know, that we just say, as the states, enough is enough. And if the federal government can't do what they're supposed to do, have a military that protects us, protect our borders, guarantee certain rights to all people, if the government can't do this, why do we continue to send the money to Washington, D.C. to do these things?
Well, here's the thing. I think, and we've talked about this before, and it's a little bit crazy, but I think we should eliminate federal income tax, let all the states charge income tax, and then kick up to the federal government for the necessities that they need. Now, the federal government is beholden to the 50 states rather than the 50 states being beholden to the government. So the federal government can't say you're going to teach critical race theory or you're not getting this billion-dollar grant.
Right. Which we've seen them do.
Every time they send money down from Washington, there are strings attached to it, right?
I mean, we did a podcast on the adoption agency that pivoted because they were getting a lot of federal funds, and they were going to stop giving them the federal funds because they were only giving children, in this adoption agency, they were only giving children to those that were of a male and a female. They were not doing same-sex relationships. And the federal government stepped in and said, if you don't start doing this, we're going to take money away from you. Grants that we give you, funds that we give you, and they pivoted and started doing it.
So wouldn't it be better if the federal government relied on a 10% off the top from the states to pay for the things they had to pay for, rather than for the states to be beholden to a singular power, singular ideology of either ilk, by the way, up in Washington?
Well, I've heard people say that the income tax or the federal tax is the greatest Ponzi scheme ever seen, because we give the money to the federal government and don't see the return on it. Yeah. We don't see the return on it. You know, they tell us all these different things that they're doing, but yet in the long run, it doesn't benefit the common person.
It's all pork. It's all it's 90% overhead and 10% services. Right. So, and the building more government is not the answer to anything. So
some of the questions here recently, where the schools were shut down because of the government, but the government gave them all these funds. Where was the money spent?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't spent on making your school safe from COVID. Where was it spent? You know, you don't have the classrooms. You don't have all those things.
Oh, look at Pinellas County, just down the road from us. They got a giant, down in Largo, they got a giant Department of Education complex, and the kids are going to school. They got fountains and marble statues, and the kids are going to school in portables. Mm-hmm. So was the money really meant for the administration, for a top-heavy administration in Pinellas County? Maybe. I don't know. It's not my county. But, I mean, wouldn't it be better to build schools and put kids in actual school buildings rather than putting school administrators in a fancy office complex for themselves? It's just a waste. It's just a waste. So and by the way, we're in the second half of the show. We're at the 38-minute mark. But they have this is, as far as Christians go, this is partially our fault. In other words, Christians for decades now have relied on giving the government the money so they don't have to handle their own generosity, their own charity themselves, right? So the biblical structure is for a family to take care of a family as well as they can. If the family can't do it, the church steps in and does it. If the church can't do it, the community then does it. It was never meant to send $1 million to Washington that they'll send $100,000 down to your neighbors for food, water, and shelter. Right. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous model.
Well, we should be
able to fully deduct. We should have the option of donating to charity locally or paying taxes.
Right.
I mean, they should be fully. It should be fully written off.
Well, I think you need to get the government out of that anyway. I mean, look, we can go back and look what just happened in New York. The mayor there, his wife was given like $1 billion or something like that to help the poor and the homeless. And what'd she do with it? Nothing.
What'd the Clintons do with all the money they raised?
Yeah. So, I mean,
they raised money for Haiti. They raised money for Puerto Rico. They got nothing.
Yeah. Well, going back to what we started this off on, on the proliferation of false and misleading narratives, which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. The number 2 thing behind that was the summary of terrorism threat to the U.S. homeland. The next part about that said, continued calls for violence directed at U.S. critical infrastructure, so targets and mass gatherings, faith-based institutions such as churches, synagogues, and mosques, institutions of higher education, racial and religious minorities, government facilities, and personnel, including law enforcement and military. There's this continuing call for violence. But, I'll bring up something real quick. The Catholic Church went after the U.S. government, the Department of Justice, because of all the vandalisms and all the destructions that they're having done to their churches, and the federal government is more interested in parents that are complaining about the teachers and what they're teaching at the schools. Yeah. They're not even investigating this. They're not even looking at it. And it started when that Black Lives Matters guy made the statement that all depictions of a white Christ, his followers,
Sean King, I think his name.
Sean King, should be destroyed. And there has been it's just every day we're pulling up and seeing another Catholic church where figures, pictures, things like that have been vandalized.
Yeah. So we as Protestants don't have a lot of statues.
Yeah, we don't.
We're not a statue.
We might have a cross, but
we don't have Jesus on the cross. Jesus is alive, right?
He's alive.
So the Catholic Church would then receive the brunt of that. So it's an attack on Christianity, not just the Catholic Church. And Christians need to recognize that.
Yeah.
If we had stained glass windows and white Jesus in our churches, which we generally don't have, we don't have a single statue in our church.
Well, and I made the statement when Biden was elected, and kind of some of the things that were going on, because they were so still after Trump, and we talked about this, that all Trump supporters were just white racists. And so when I would go to churches, I would walk their parking lot, and I would look at the vehicles in the parking lot, and I would look for NRA, Trump for 2020, all these different signs like that, because guess what? Now they're considered white racists. So even if you had a predominantly black church that was pro-Trump and you had those signs up, you were racist. So now I thought we would see an increase in vandalisms on just normal churches. Didn't see it, but it's kind of like, I think it was an opportunity missed because they could point at us and say that we were white racists because we have a Trump, sticker on the back of our truck, or an NRA. So we're, for gun violence and all these things like that. So they're going to come after you somewhere. They wanted to see how much money you spent on things. If you did $600 transaction, they wanted to see where that money went. Why did they want to see where that money went? Because if you gave it to a conservative group,
you could be on the list.
You're on the list. You're on the list. So these are things that we block.
I never put that together, but you're right.
No,
so
yeah.
It becomes more and more controlling. By the way, in Canada, they managed to freeze 30 crypto accounts of the truckers or people that supported the truckers.
Yeah.
I thought you couldn't mess with crypto. How in the world did they manage to?
Yeah.
So it's the exchange that you keep your crypto on that can be controlled by the government. So I have Coinbase for mine, and they could, if I don't take it off of that and put it on a private key, a private wallet, electronic wallet, then they can control it.
So when you think they can't get you, they will get you. And so doxing. Yeah, I don't know if you remember the doxing thing where they were putting out people's information.
They just did it up again in Canada. A lady had to close her cafe because she was getting threats.
Yeah, because she was getting threats because she agreed with the truckers.
Yeah.
So
well, she donated $40. No, the cafe donated $250, and she got doxed. And then a private party donated $40, and they got doxed and were receiving threats and had needed protection and all that. So it is. So here's the thing. It is an attack on conservatism, which at its very core is an attack on the church. In other words, the church is the foundation, is the author of the conservative viewpoints, right? We were a Christian nation. We're not anymore. That's obvious. But we were founded on Judeo-Christian values. The government was not set up to protect. The Constitution was not written to protect the government from churches. It was written to protect the churches from the government.
Exactly.
And we've allowed that to be turned around. Christians have allowed that to be turned around, and we need to now own up to that first of all, and then stop being willing to set aside and sit on your hands and shut up. We're getting ready to wrap things up, but the people that say that Christians shouldn't speak into politics are just not Christians. Of course, they're going to say that. The secular world, that's a rule of the secular world. Who says Jim and Kevin, as active Christian leaders, can't speak into politics? I mean, I'm not for a theocracy. I don't think we should have an established state religion. It's never worked out before.
No.
But it doesn't mean that people of faith shouldn't be allowed, Christians particularly, not every faith, let's be honest, but Christians particularly shouldn't be allowed to speak into things because the laws are written that way. The laws are absolutely not written that way. Our Constitution is absolutely not written that way.
Right.
We were founded by Christians. We are a Christian, or we're a Christian nation. That's the reality of the situation.
I just keep going back to this, that this is so disturbing that the administration that spied on a president is now in charge with all that information, and they're listening to anybody that sows discord or undermine public trust.
That's us.
That's us. The proliferation of false or misleading narratives, whether it's dis, or malinformation. And they will sit here and say that we're misinforming people. You know, we're giving disinformation.
And they don't need a human being to do it. So don't think that. Don't think
don't.
that little guys like us are immune because it's a computer doing it.
Yeah.
Right? It's
We've seen
artificial
this in Facebook.
intelligence.
Both of us have had incidences.
I get banned from Facebook all the time.
Yeah,
I don't say crazy things.
No, you got banned because of 2 posts that I'm telling you, somebody didn't read your post. It was because of the data that was scraped off of it that it came bact and said.
Yeah, exactly right.
And we posted a blog that we had done, and they went and said, because we had missed COVID information in our blog. We talked about how COVID had shut down the country. How did we? Isn't that what happened?
Well, so it goes to rules for thee and not for me, right?
Yeah.
So we'll wrap it up now. It's 1:45. We've been on 47 minutes, but and we should try to shorten the show a little bit. We need to understand as Christians that this is not okay. We can no longer just sit by and let these things happen around us. And we're beginning to see the common people, blue-collar people like Jim and Kevin, saying enough is enough. Parents saying enough is enough. Truckers saying enough is enough. When are we going to start hearing Christians say enough is enough? We're not doing this anymore.
Right.
I don't want to limit the freedoms of anyone, but I'm not surrendering my freedom so you can have more freedom. Right. That's it's insanity that we're fighting racism with racism. It's insanity that we've taken hate out of hate speech. Mm-hmm. I think one of the foundations of something being hate speech is should be hateful, not just hurt your feelings, but hateful. Right. So we've got to pump the brakes here, America, and Christians need to wake up. Conservatives need to wake up and say this is not good enough. And by the way, if you're on the left and you're a liberal, some of this stuff shouldn't be good enough for you either.
Well, look, listen, people are waking up with buyer remorse. Like we nominated this guy. Yeah. Our gas prices are over $1 what it was last year. Our food has gone up. The inflation rate hit 7% or more the other day. That was just shocking to everybody. So if you continue to feel that your government's not doing their thing for you or helping you out, maybe you need to pay attention to it and see what's happening. Maybe you need to take a look at it.
Well, for the first time in the history of True Christian Talk, guess what I got? An email alert that we were on the air.
Oh, wow.
For the first time.
First time in a while.
62 weeks.
Wow.
They finally sent out that we were on the air. That's never happened. I got it on my phone. I've always had to go look for it. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, Jessica Howard, I wonder who she is, said, we've even seen cases where American flags in churches are getting burned because American flags are also racist.
Yeah, well, I did a show on that on the God Logic Project, but eventually that's going to be a hate symbol.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they can do it with whatever they want.
San Francisco just got rid of 3 of the people on their school board because they wanted to change the name of a school that was named Abraham Lincoln School. Yeah. They wanted to change the name of it. We've lost it. It has gone that far. We'll be burning books out here soon. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's just it's.
Well, there was a bill in California. We talked this is way years ago that would have banned the sale of the Bible in the state of California.
It was going that way, yes, because
so
you could not give therapy to anybody that wanted to be a transgender.
And any book that spoke out against homosexuality or anything would be illegal to sell.
Hate speech.
Yeah, illegal to sell, which would have included the Bible. So, so we've averted disaster. I think this upcoming election is going to be pretty important.
But if we don't vote, it's not going to be there.
So that's it. I'm preparing myself now, man. I became a Republican first time after 25 years of being a.
Welcome to the dark side.
25 years or more of being independent, and I was a Democrat for the first few years. But I couldn't help it. I was from New York City. Everybody was a Democrat.
Right.
I didn't know any better. So that's our show today, guys. We love you. Thank you for watching. If you would, please share this content because YouTube is not going to help us in any way, shape, or form. If there's anything we can do for you, contact us, truechristiantalkinfo@gmail.com. If you need help, you want to be on the show, you got a topic for the show, you simply need prayer, you got somebody in your family, a loved one struggling with addiction, whatever it is, we're here to help. So if you want to message us, truechristiantalkinfo@gmail.com. We help people. We do this once a week, and the rest of the week we're out trying to make a difference. So we're trying to make a difference with this show. So share this content. If you got value from it, subscribe, give it a thumbs up. And thank you for joining us, Jimmy.
Yeah, next week we're going to be a little early, just to let everybody know, because I've got an engagement afterwards. But, you know, we listen to all sides. I can't say this enough. But we listen to a conversation and not a screaming match.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reason for it. I have friends of mine that are lean left, and I love them to death, and I tell them what my stance is as far as the things I have to vote for. And that goes along with, you know, pro-church, pro-law enforcement, pro-life, and pro-Israel. Those are really four things I always look for when I'm voting for somebody. So if, you know, you look at me and say, well, you're pro-choice, then we're going to agree to disagree. I'm not going to beat you up over it. And I'm not going to call you a sinner, and I'm not going to call you a baby killer.
Throw red paint on you.
I'm not going to throw red paint on you. But I'm just going to explain to you that I have two beautiful children. You have beautiful children.
Hundreds.
Yeah, that would not be here if, you know, we had been pro. Yeah. Maybe not been here if we.
Well,
we
yeah, I'd say I'd add to that list pro-Constitution. I think for me it's.
I agree.
Pro-Scripture, pro-Constitution, pro-Israel, and pro-life. I mean.
But if
pro-family, all these legislation that weakens the family unit is killing this country.
Yeah.
So anyway, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. Awesome show today, Jimmy. That was a good one.
We try.
I think I might actually watch this one. You know, I never watch our shows. I might actually watch this one.
I watch them because I want to get better.
Yeah.
So I watch it all the time.
I just can't stand watching myself on video.
Yeah.
Well, we love
You're
you.
Not that bad.
We love you guys. Thank you for watching. And we'll see you next week a little bit early, 10 o'clock instead of 11.
Let's do 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock instead of 11. God bless, and we'll see you next week.
God bless you. God bless this country.
Bye.